Is it important to you to see black folks in positions of leadership around South Carolina? Is there plenty of room around the table for South Carolinians of all colors? How do we change opportunities for all our citizens? On this broadcast, you will hear dramatic stories of pain and healing, loss and gain. Let us know what you think. With this show, we're sending out our third in the series on race relations. Are they making a difference? Our website is theconnectionshow.org. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Pat Jobe. Thank you for making the connection.
This goes out to the people, making this a better place. Here's a shout to the people, showing us a better way. The stories are inspiring, they show us what we can do. When folks get involved, when problems get solved, they're making the connection.
Poverty, discrimination, prejudices, biases, and just intolerance.
Comfort, knowledge, acceptance, assimilation, and tolerance.
Part of it is our history. Part of it may just be some kind of human nature, that we're just not comfortable with other cultures and other people who maybe think differently than us.
It touches every life, and it's something that really permeates our society, in South Carolina in particular. You can see it even when you meet someone for the first time. And either they look you in the eye, or they sort of look through you and they look behind you and they want to know what else is coming. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're there, but really, where's the person in charge?
What has changed is how it comes out. It used to be in the open. Now it's very subtle. You have to really read into it. You have to really know the people, know the institution, whoever you're dealing with.
But it has been an issue in South Carolina for almost 300 years, and it's probably the one factor that has kept us from being the best place in the world to live and the best state.
Racism is alive and well. It's not just South Carolina. The whole nation is devastated by this issue of racism. And I don't want to go back through all the issues, but just like with Katrina and the Gulf Coast, all that, the situation with the war in Iraq, you can see all the different hands in the pie when you talk about racism. So we have to educate from the top down. And each individual have to do his or her part. Racism affects every aspect of our lives, from our educational system to our economic system, to our health system. Every aspect, nothing's without racist attitudes and the problem of racism being pervasive. So it's devastating.
What it's cost us is we've been at least two societies struggling to really achieve the same thing. We've not been able to share a common vision of education, of healthcare, of housing.
It's cost our state, specifically, probably economically, it's cost us culturally, it's cost us in the way in which we even view our history. We continue to be stuck on this question of heritage versus hate. Mm-hmm. And outside of that binary framework is really the question of what is our heritage, and do we share a common heritage?
It manifests itself in the destruction it does in the community. Let's take, for example, the school systems in the state, the school systems that are not funded properly. It's all internal racism. It's systemic, it's institutional. That's what it's all about.
What's frustrating at the moment on the issue of race relations is that if you look at some of the positions of power within the state of South Carolina, whether it's the governor's office, whether it's the leadership in the General Assembly, whether it's the head of big business in the state, none of those positions are occupied by people of color, whether we're talking about African Americans or anyone else. And that has to be a major barrier for anyone who's coming into the state. And you look around and you see, well, where is the evidence of diversity in the state?
One of the problems with our legislative districts is we've drawn them so that they are guaranteed to create a polarization in the political process. We have districts that are 80 and 85% African American, and we have districts that are 100% white. So there's no incentive there on the part of legislators who are elected from those districts to find common ground. Why should they? And in fact, what happens in a Republican primary, like right after the flag compromise was reached, is you've got a lot of voters who don't understand why you're compromising with those African Americans at all. And the same thing happens in the African American community. Why are you compromising with white people? And so even in the primaries there, you're producing the more extreme candidates. So when they get to Columbia, they are already locked into their view of how the world works, and they're not really interested in finding common ground.
It's costing us money. And if we do not get smart enough and realize it's affecting us, in the sense it's affecting us, South Carolina will never be the state that it could be. It's hurting our tourism, it's hurting our economic situation here in the state.
The hospital that I was born in 1970 was the hospital in Columbia for blacks. It was a segregated hospital. The school system where I attended school in Lexington County was not integrated fully until the year before I actually started my formal schooling. So these are things that are of recent vintage to me. They're not ancient history. And not only the stories that I heard, grew up hearing from my parents and from my grandparents, but also the lived existence has made it clear that we have struggled through a great deal of animosity and discord around issues of race, and we continue to deal with those issues, but we are getting better.
It's in 1966, early 67, when I was going to an all-black school, and during the integration came on then, and my mother got this I'll never forget it, it was a yellow paper that said I was going to an all-white school the following year. She did not understand it because she could not read. And I remember she said, "I'm signing a paper, you got to take it back to the school." And as I've grown older now, sometimes I say to myself, if only she knew what she was signing for me to do, and she did not know that. But the point I want to make about that is, by going to the white school for high school, that's what changed who I am today. Okay. Yes, we walked 7 miles. Talking about poverty now. We walked 7 miles. We had hand-me-down clothes. But by me being able to go to the all-white school, I got an opportunity that I would have never gotten, and I took advantage of it, and it made a difference. And I think, Pat, that's what I'm seeing one day happening in Jasper County, Clarendon County, Williamsburg County. And I'm not talking about a school that's separate, because what is happening, you take a Sumter High School now, almost 80% black, and very few whites. That's not the kind of school I went to. I went to a high school. It was the opposite. I think Edmonds at that time was like 1,900 student body. We might have 365 blacks. But the quality of education that we were able to get by sitting at the same desk, sitting at the same table, in the same classroom, using the same wonderful facilities, I think is what made the difference.
I knew a lot of black kids and a lot of white kids, and knew their parents, and so I had an interesting perspective on those kinds of issues that were taking place then. And I think one thing that just struck me was how everybody, whether they were black or white, rich or poor, they all really believed in the same things, and they wanted the same things for themselves and for their children. They all wanted safe neighborhoods. They all wanted nice, secure homes to live in. They wanted their kids to go to good schools. All of that was something we all agreed on, and yet somehow we just couldn't seem to figure out how to make that work.
I grew up across the street from what was an old Rosenwald school. Julius Rosenwald was a philanthropist and former head of the Sears Roebuck Company. Opened a number of schools for African Americans in the South. Thousands of them. And the community where I grew up developed around this Rosenwald school. The community did not exist until that school came there. I had relatives who taught in the school. My mother went all the way through, from K through 12, to that school. And we ended up living across the street from that school. I grew up across from that school. So even after integration, when it became an intermediate school, it stood as a physical symbol. And I had this collection of yearbooks, both from my aunt who taught at the school and from my mother during her time there, where I could look and see majorettes, I could see physics teachers, I could see operas that were being put on by the students, all by black students. So it never occurred to me that this was something that was unusual or that was out of the norm. And you could see also that those students then went on to become successful in various fields, whether it was athletics or academia or business, that they distinguished themselves through this ethic of achievement.
My father was an Episcopal priest. His father was also. He was in Walterboro, my dad was in Somerville. My mother was from Manning, and her father was a judge. So all of my family were involved in their community somehow, and they were involved in ways that put them in a position to help solve problems rather than to be creating them. So I grew up in a family where our goal was to be as involved as possible and to help communities find some positive, constructive way to deal with their problems. There was an African-American lady who told me one time that being African-American in South Carolina was like going through life with a pair of shoes, wearing a pair of shoes that were the wrong size. She said, you're always aware that you don't fit in, that the advertising is projected primarily at white consumers. That when you walk in the door of a store, for example, or you walk into a restaurant, that people notice that you are not white. I don't know that as a white person, I can explain it terribly well, but it is a subconscious and a very conscious awareness that being white in our society is better than being something else. And that's something that we white people hate to admit, but it is.
One night there was a shooting in the town, and it was a black man, they assumed shot someone. I was coming out of my house about 11 o'clock that night when it happened, and I'd heard the radio. They were talking about a robbery and a possible shooting. And as soon as I walked out my door and turned the corner in my car, there must have been 15, 20 police cars surrounded me and drew guns at my head. And this is not too long ago. This is very recent. Drew guns at my head and had me spread eagle and treated me like a piece of meat. And I was not even guilty. I just happened to be black in the area where the robbery occurred, which was not too far from where I lived, near a cemetery. And that's very painful. And to show you that this is not an isolated incident, about 2 years ago, up in Edgefield County, I was coming out of a revival one night, and the very same thing happened. My wife and kids were in the car, and we were coming out of this revival, and we were headed home, and all of these sheriffs and everybody was white, no blacks, sheriffs and white patrol officers stopped our car, and supposed to be a simple driver's license check. Next thing I knew, I was outside, my kids and wife was inside, and my hands was up on the hood, and they did the routine for no reason at all. And here I had my collar on that night, so it's not like they didn't recognize. Plus, my driver's license has my collar on it, so they knew that I was clergy, but that had nothing to do with it. My car was the only one stopped that night. Everybody else just kept going by. And they detained me and my family. I think we stayed there a good 45 minutes. All right, so it's
So you were guilty of driving while black?
Yes. And then they said to me, everything's okay now, you can leave. And my family, my son, it permeates his memory. He's now a student at Claflin College, and he's often said to me, Dad, I'll never forget that night. Yeah.
When I graduated from high school, I went to Harvard. And I remember the summer when I came back to Lexington, I got asked the same questions over and over again, not by my friends, but by the parents of other people. So how did you get in? Well, I filled out an application. I had an interview. I took the SAT. well, what were your SAT scores? And I tell them what my SAT scores were, and they were above even the median for Harvard's entering class. And I thought that they were just asking those questions for information purposes. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they were trying to figure out if I was simply an affirmative action case or if there was some other reason. And once I presented them with all of the information, they were a little incredulous. So saying, well, you couldn't have had SAT scores that were that high, you couldn't have been able to do this, you couldn't have been able to do that. What is it about you that made you think that you could do this? And I said, well, where I grew up, it was an expectation that I would do well. No one ever told me differently. And to confront that belief that I wasn't even entitled to success, I think has been the most difficult barrier. But as I said, it hasn't been in any way paralyzing. It's simply an obstacle that must be overcome.
At that time, racism was at its highest. You know, there was Ku Klux Klan, bonfires being burned. We couldn't go across the track. I lived what we call across the track. We weren't allowed to cross the track. We worked in the fields, cropped tobacco, picked cotton. So that's the environment we came out of. We'd work all day in the fields. For example, in the tobacco fields, we'd work in the tobacco fields, get 7 hours a day. And the white man owned the general store. We'd buy a hunk of bologna, some crackers, some cheese, and half of that was gone. So we didn't understand it then. But that was racism at its best. We made the money, we gave it right back to them. So worked for $7 a day, or we picked cotton and made $2 a day, and we ate it up. So we really it was a never-ending story for us where we couldn't gain anything.
Today in South Carolina, there are 178,000 interracial couples. In fact, we had a law in the books up until 5 years ago. It was in our state constitution that people could not intermarry. And so that would have meant those 178,000 people or couples were illegal in our state. We had a referendum to take that provision out of our state constitution, and fortunately it passed. But 38% of the voters said no, they wanted to keep it. So there's a pretty big message right there about interracial couples. I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by the issue of race. To have a community meeting or a church meeting where you're going to talk about racism is daunting to people. It also brings up a lot of negative and a lot of emotional feelings that often sidetrack us. One of the best things we can do is to take one step at a time and not look at doing away with racism, but learning how to deal with issues where race is a factor.
It's the fear of hurting others, people that you're close to. That's why it's not talked about.
One of the frustrations that we encounter in race relations is that we expect the other guy to come in and be just like us. And if they can't be just like us, if they can't like the same things that we like, if they don't socialize in the same places where we socialize, then we don't think that we can have anything to do with them. But if we could look beyond that and say, well, they have their likes and their dislikes, and they may be different from ours, but they don't prevent us from working together or accomplishing the goals that we'd like to accomplish as an organization.
It's very important for white people to realize that African Americans are dealing with the race issue every day, and Hispanics are dealing with the race issue every day. We can have a nice dialogue, black and white dialogue around issues of race, but ultimately when we go home, white people go back to a society that is basically a white society. Black people are still black, and they still have to deal with these issues of race every day. If we can just pay a little attention to that and respond and be aware of it, I think we can begin to break down some of those barriers. There's a video on YouTube that's going around right now where a young woman apparently had repeated the test with the dolls that were used back in the 1950s in the Brown versus Board of Education decision, where they asked children to pick which doll they would like to most be like, and they have a black doll and a white doll. And that test was used as evidence in the Brown versus Board of Education decision. This young lady in 2006 repeated that test with the black dolls and the white dolls and found that children just as they did in the 50s, predominantly chose the white doll. When they were asked who's the good doll and who's the bad doll, they chose the white doll as being good and the black
These were the black
being
children
bad.
choosing the white doll.
Right, as well as the white children, sure. So it shows that those messages that white is better is still a very powerful message in our society. And it does affect people, even the youngest of us.
So the way in which we worship, the way in which we speak, the food that we eat is all influenced by African and African American traditions. If we look at our heritage in a much more complete way, we'll see that we have a common heritage. And it doesn't just begin in 1861. It begins long before that. And what South Carolina could benefit from is recognizing that common heritage and then moving beyond that. Not to lay blame, not to say that someone is owed something or that the state has to provide some sort of compensation. Those are separate questions and separate issues. But from the process of healing a people, of moving beyond the divisions that separate us, if we could look at those commonalities that we share, the people who've raised us are often the people who've raised both black children and white children. The values that they've instilled in those children are the same values. There is very little in our heritage that should be cause for division. Very brief periods in our heritage that should be cause for division. And if the state could recognize that, then I think it would realize some of those things that it has lost because it hasn't even thought to capitalize upon them.
I think, from a religious perspective, I think the church, because it's such a racist institution, church is one of the most segregated places, okay? And yet they call on us to be the change agents. There's something wrong with that picture. And I think if the church, the leadership of the church, can move and dialogue, there's a possibility that something could happen. But I don't see that happening. And here we call ourselves people of God, you know, black and white. We all worship, like my church is black on Sunday. There are no whites. And I can take you other places where the churches are white on Sunday. There's something wrong with that picture. We should be able to get around that. And I think if the churches would be the people of God that we're called to be, I think the churches can make a major change in this race relation picture that we're trying to.
So you see that happen?
Oh, I see it happening. It's a slow process. You know, I'm on the South Carolina Christian Action Council. I attend the meetings and we talk about issues, and we got all the brothers and sisters at the table. But we're doing it in a small scale. So if we could sit down, 15 of us, and dialogue, okay, without confrontation, why can't churches do the same thing?
Our real mission is to find new ideas and put them to work in South Carolina. In South Carolina, we're 49th and 50th in the nation in many quality of life areas. And our philosophy is that some states are number one and number two, and we want to find out what they're doing right, study them, and then see if we can adapt some of the ideas that they have to the way we solve problems in South Carolina. Well, I'm more hopeful about Southerners than I am about anybody else. The Palmetto Project we did a survey 10 years ago of people in South Carolina, and we asked them if they could tell us if they could name a person who was either a close personal friend or was a person who had had a significant impact on their lives, who was of another culture or another ethnicity. 70% of the people we talked to said yes, they could name somebody who was different from them, who had had a positive impact on their lives. And so the reason I think there's hope is that most of us can think of a time in our lives when we were in an interaction with somebody who was different, and it was a positive interaction. It made a difference to us in a positive, constructive way. If we can all go back to that time in our lives and remember those episodes in our lives and think about what it was that we brought to the table, what it was that the other person brought to the table, then maybe we can begin to reconstruct our relationships based on those positive values rather than on the negative instances and the things that did not work, the things that made us think less of people rather than more of them.
People can change, that people age out, and that young people come along. But those two things give me the most hope. That some people who have lived a life a certain way can understand that there is a need for change, and that they can not only grow to accept that change, but to embrace the change. And then to have younger people come along who say that all of these things that you adults are arguing about are silly.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just find who we like and build rich lives with those people who we like? That gives me the most hope, both the generations to come and the generations that are already here. I think there's a great deal of potential in both.
I'm also the past president of my Rotary Club, and there's only 2 blacks in my Rotary Club out of 50. So my presence in that room, my presence in those meetings, I think go a long ways to making race relations better in Columbia. And then for them choosing me to be electing me to be the president of my club says a lot.
Big deal.
Yeah. And it wasn't just, I wasn't just the president of my club, I was the president in the centennial year of Rotary. I was the centennial president. And for my club to put that honor on my shoulders, you know, I think we've gone a long ways, and I think they're really pioneers when it comes to trying to bridge this gap when it comes to race relations.
You have children?
I do. I have one. He's in college right now.
What has been your message to him about race relations?
Well, it's more been his message to me.
Okay.
He has grown up in a society where everything was multicultural. His best friend was Chinese when he was very young. He has African American friends and white friends, and they don't even understand when adults might say, well, if you're going to have a party, will there be black kids here, or will this be your white friends? They just don't see it. Now that he's older, he's of course aware of how segregated our society has been, and he's aware that his black friends are treated differently by the world than his white friends. But as far as he's concerned, the only world in which he's comfortable in is one that's multicultural. It's kind of totally different from what I grew up with.
I love people. I could care less what color you are. I respect you. I expect you to respect me. And I go out of my way to reach out to folk. And it's not just a white issue. Whether you're Asian, it does not matter to me. I try to reach out to everybody.
South Carolina really has done a lot in race relations. We need to give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back. We've been trying, and our communities have been trying. We know that it's an issue. We don't have magic answers yet, but in 1998 we had a rash of church burnings back then. But the reaction of the communities around the state was very heartening. I was very, very touched by how the white and black community came together to respond to these attacks on houses of worship. So there are instances like that where more and more we're seeing people take a chance to make things better rather than sit back and let bad things continue to happen.
How does all this touch you? Will you begin a conversation with a person of another race? Maybe a coworker with whom you've never discussed issues of black and white? Let us know how it goes for you. As a nonprofit, we continue to need your financial support. You can make an online tax-deductible donation at our website, or you can mail it to The Connection, Box 12, 110, Charleston, South Carolina, 29422. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing our dream of making a difference in South Carolina and across America.
When we listen to a story and we see the world through someone else's eyes, it can help us understand them as they talk of what's important in their life. We start breaking down those walls. We're not so different after all. We're making the connection. Making the connection. making the connection.